On Christmas, a Chinese widow knocked with 3 starving kids. The rancher set the table and said, "Sit." The wind howled across the open fields, carrying with it the bitter chill of winter. Snow lay in soft, uneven patches across the ranch, and the bare trees creaked under the weight of ice. Inside the little farmhouse, Mr. Thompson sat alone in his worn armchair, staring at the flickering fire in the hearth. The warmth of the flames contrasted sharply with the cold that seeped through the cracks of the wooden walls. It was Christmas Eve, a quiet and lonely one, as it had been for many years since his wife had passed. The table was set for one, with a simple plate of roasted chicken, bread, and a small portion of mashed potatoes. The smell of the meal filled the air, but it did little to lift his spirits. Outside, the snow continued to fall, creating a muffled, almost magical silence. Mr. Thompson could hear the soft whistle of the wind, but no footsteps, no voices, nothing but the occasional groan of the old farmhouse settling in the cold. He wrapped his hands around a steaming mug of tea and sighed. Christmas had always been a special time, filled with laughter and warmth, but now it was quiet, almost too quiet. His thoughts wandered to memories of past Christmases, the smell of pine from the tree his wife had loved, the laughter of friends and neighbors, the excited chatter of children opening gifts. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. Just as he was about to take a bite of his food, there was a soft knock at the door. It was so gentle that he almost thought he had imagined it. Frowning, he stood and walked over, feeling a mix of curiosity and caution. He opened the door slowly and was met with a sight that made his heart pause. Standing in the snow, bundled in thin, worn clothing, was a woman holding the hands of 3 small children. Their faces were pale and flushed from the cold, their eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The woman's eyes were dark and tired, but there was a quiet strength in them, a determination to protect the children at any cost. "Please," she said in a soft, accented voice, "may we come in?" Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness but from the chill and the long journey she had taken. The children clung to her skirts, shivering, their little hands red and raw from the cold. "Mr. Thompson didn't hesitate. He opened the door wider and gestured for them to enter. "Of course," he said, his voice calm and gentle. "Come in, sit by the fire, you're safe here." The snow melted from their boots and coats onto the old wooden floor, but Mr. Thompson paid no mind. He went to fetch extra blankets and draped them over the children's shoulders. They looked so small and fragile, yet there was something brave in their eyes, something that had survived hardship beyond their years. He motioned for them to sit at the table, pulling out the chairs carefully so the little ones could climb onto them. "Eat," he said simply, placing the plates on the table. "You must be hungry." Thompson watched them quietly, giving them space but staying close enough to offer comfort if needed. Slowly, the youngest boy reached out with trembling hands and took a piece of bread. The girl beside him followed suit, and soon all 3 were eating, their movements careful and shy, but eager. Mrs. Lynn, the woman, sank into the chair across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes darted from the fire to the children, making sure they were safe, warm, and finally fed. Mr. Thompson poured her a cup of tea and set it in front of her. "Drink. It will warm you up," he said softly. For a few minutes there was silence, broken only by the soft clinking of cutlery and the quiet chewing of hungry children. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside there was a fragile, growing sense of comfort. Mr. Thompson realized that despite the cold and the loneliness of the evening, the presence of these strangers had brought life back into the old farmhouse. After a while, Mrs. Lynn spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We have nowhere else to go. My husband, he is gone. I have no family here, and the children, they have been hungry for days. That is all that matters for now. Sit by the fire, eat your fill, and tomorrow we will see what we can do to help you." Thompson went to the kitchen and returned with extra blankets and warm coats he had saved for guests who rarely came. He handed them to Mrs. Lynn and the children, making sure they were wrapped snugly. "You'll need these for tonight," he said. It is cold, and the night is long. Despite hunger, cold, and fear, they had carried themselves with dignity. He had seen many faces in his life, but there was something remarkable about the way these children held on to hope, even when the world had seemed so harsh. The woman began to tell a little about their journey, though she did not go into all the painful details. She spoke of traveling through towns and villages, searching for work, and finding only closed doors. She spoke of the nights spent shivering under the sky, the long days of walking without food, and the constant worry for her children. Each word was filled with quiet strength, and Mr. Thompson listened, feeling a mix of sorrow and admiration for her resilience. Outside, the wind continued its song, but inside, the small farmhouse felt like a different world. The fire crackled and popped, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The smell of the food mingled with the warmth and the quiet laughter of the children, who were beginning to tell small stories and ask questions about the ranch, the animals, and the stars they could see through the frosted windows. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, sipping his tea, and watched them. He realized that sometimes the most unexpected visitors could bring the greatest gifts, not with wealth or power, but with courage, trust, and the simple act of being human. Hours passed, and the children finally finished their meal. Their eyes, once dull with hunger, now sparkled faintly with the joy of being fed. Mrs. Lynn looked at Mr. Thompson with gratitude, her voice catching as she said, I don't know how to thank you." Mrs. Lynn followed, grateful for the simple comfort of a roof over their heads, food in their stomachs, and a kind stranger who had opened his home and heart to them. Standing in the doorway for a moment, Mr. Thompson looked down at them. He smiled, a quiet, contented smile, and felt a warmth that had been absent from his life for many Christmases. It was the warmth of compassion, human connection, and the knowledge that on this cold winter night, he had made a difference in the lives of a mother and her children. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the ranch in white, but inside the farmhouse glowed with light, warmth, and hope. On that quiet Christmas Eve, amidst the cold and the silence, the kindness of one man had created a haven for 3 hungry children and their brave mother. A small miracle that reminded everyone present that even in the darkest times, compassion could shine brightest. And for Mr. Thompson, sitting alone by the fire afterward, he realized that sometimes unexpected knocks at the door brought the greatest gifts of all. The morning sun slowly rose over the snow-covered ranch, casting long, golden rays through the frost-tipped windows. Inside the farmhouse, the air was filled with the quiet sounds of life waking up. Mr. Thompson had already risen before dawn, quietly preparing a warm breakfast for his unexpected guests. The smell of sizzling bacon and frying eggs drifted through the house, mingling with the aroma of fresh bread he had baked the night before. In the guest room, the children stirred as the sun peeked through the curtains. The youngest little Daniel rubbed his eyes and whispered to his sister May, "Are we still here? Did we really stay in a warm house?" His voice was filled with awe, still unsure whether this comfort was real after so many days of hunger and cold. May smiled softly, brushing back her dark hair. "Yes, we are," she said gently. "And I think we are safe." She glanced at her younger brother, whose wide eyes reflected a mixture of wonder and disbelief. The oldest Lee was already sitting up, stretching his arms, a small smile tugging at his lips as he looked around the cozy room. Mrs. Lynn quietly rose from her bed and stood by the window, looking out at the ranch. The snow glistened under the rising sun, the silence of the morning broken only by the distant calls of birds and the occasional creak of the barn. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the house seep into her bones. For the first time in days, she felt a small measure of hope. Downstairs, Mr. Thompson was finishing the breakfast preparations. He had placed plates on the table, each one filled with eggs, bacon, fresh bread, and a small bowl of fruit. He also brewed a pot of tea, knowing Mrs. Lynn would appreciate something warm to drink. The simple meal was prepared with care, and though it lacked extravagance, it was enough to fill empty stomachs and lift weary spirits. "Breakfast is ready," he called gently. "Come down when you're ready. Today is a new day, and we will start it with a good meal." Lynn watched them, her hands folded on the table, overwhelmed by the kindness of a stranger. After breakfast, Mr. Thompson cleared the dishes and put on his coat. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you around the ranch." Now they found themselves surrounded by open fields, barns, and animals that seemed as surprised to see them as they were to see the animals. Horses grazed quietly, their breath rising in soft clouds, and cows stood in the barn, lowing softly. Chickens clucked and pecked at the frozen ground. The children's laughter began to bubble up as they watched the animals, their small hands pointing and reaching out in wonder. "This is amazing," Lee exclaimed. "I've never seen so many animals." Thompson gave each of them a small bucket of feed and showed them how to scatter it for the chickens and the horses. Daniel laughed as a chicken pecked at the feed near his feet, and May squealed when a curious horse nuzzled her hand. Lee took careful steps, making sure the animals received enough, and watched as the cows turned their heads to follow him. "Mrs." Lynn stayed nearby, observing with a quiet smile. The sight of her children laughing, moving freely, and experiencing something new filled her heart with warmth she had not felt in months. For the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself a small moment of relief, knowing they were safe and cared for. After tending to the animals, Mr. Thompson led them to the barn where he showed them the tools, hay, and the small workshop he used for repairs. The children were fascinated, asking questions about everything they saw. "What is this?" Daniel asked, holding up a small hammer. "That," Mr. Thompson said gently, "is a tool to fix things. It helps make broken things whole again, just like we sometimes need help to feel whole inside." His words were simple, but they carried a quiet meaning. The children nodded, understanding more in their hearts than in words. Once the chores were done, they returned to the farmhouse. Mr. Thompson prepared lunch, again simple but filling, while the children played near the fire, building small towers with wooden blocks he had kept from past projects. Mrs. Lynn helped tidy up, her hands moving quickly, grateful for the small sense of normalcy she was beginning to feel. During lunch, Mrs. Lynn shared more of their story, but carefully, sparing the children from the harshest details. She spoke of their travels through the countryside, the kindness of a few strangers, and the long nights spent walking in the cold. Mr. Thompson listened quietly, nodding occasionally, understanding the weight of their journey without needing every word. The children began to open up more, telling small stories of their own. Daniel spoke of the little joys he remembered from home before their lives had changed, playing by the river, the smell of rice cooking, and the songs their father used to sing. May remembered small acts of kindness from neighbors, and Lee spoke of dreams for the future, though they were cautious dreams, shaped by hardship. Mr. Thompson smiled at them, feeling a warmth in his chest. He had seen many hardships in his life, but the courage and hope these children carried despite everything was remarkable. "You have been through a lot," he said gently, "but you are strong. You have each other, and you will find a way to get through anything together." They helped chop firewood, carry water from the well, and sweep the floor. At first, their movements were clumsy and uncertain, but under his guidance, they quickly learned. Each task they completed brought a small sense of accomplishment and pride. Mrs. Lynn watched them, amazed at how quickly they adapted. The simple acts of helping, learning, and participating in daily life gave them confidence and a sense of belonging they had not felt in a long time. She felt a deep gratitude toward Mr. Thompson, whose patience and kindness allowed her children to flourish even for a single day. As evening approached, Mr. Thompson led them outside again. The sky had turned a soft orange and pink, reflecting on the snow. He pointed to the horizon where the sun was setting. "Look at that," he said. "Even in the coldest winter, the day ends with beauty. There is always light if we look for it." Lee looked thoughtful, as if understanding something beyond words. Afterward, they returned inside, where Mr. Thompson had prepared a simple evening meal. The conversation flowed more freely now. The children laughed and asked questions about the stars, the animals, and the farm life. Mrs. Lynn joined in, her laughter soft but genuine, filling the farmhouse with warmth and light. Later, they gathered near the fire. Mr. Thompson fetched a small, worn guitar he had kept since his youth. He strummed a few simple chords and the children listened in fascination. Mrs. Lynn began to hum softly, her voice blending with the gentle music. The simple melodies filled the house, creating a sense of home and togetherness. As night fell, Mr. Thompson prepared beds for the children in the living room near the fire so they could feel safe and close. He helped tuck them in, smoothing their blankets and placing small pillows under their heads. Mrs. Lynn watched, tears brimming in her eyes, grateful for the care and thoughtfulness shown to her children. Before heading to his own bed, Mr. Thompson sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the day. The simple act of opening his home had brought unexpected joy, laughter, and hope. The sight of the children smiling, the sound of Mrs. Lynn's gentle voice, and the warmth of shared meals reminded him of what Christmas was truly about: compassion, kindness, and human connection. He looked around the house one last time, seeing the firelight dance on the walls, the children asleep with content expressions, and Mrs. Lynn resting peacefully. A quiet smile formed on his face. This Christmas, he realized, was not about the food on the table or the gifts under a tree, but about the simple, profound act of sharing one's heart and home with those in need. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, covering the ranch in a blanket of white. But inside, the farmhouse glowed with warmth, laughter, and the quiet miracles of human kindness. And for Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Lynn, and the children, it was a Christmas they would never forget, a Christmas of hope, connection, and the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The next morning, sunlight streamed softly through the frost-covered windows, filling the farmhouse with a gentle glow. The snow outside sparkled, as if the world itself had paused to admire the quiet beauty of winter. Mr. Thompson was already up, tending to the fire to ensure the house remained warm. He could hear faint movements upstairs, the soft shuffle of little feet, the quiet whispers of children waking up, and the gentle hum of Mrs. Lynn moving about. Downstairs, he prepared a simple breakfast of porridge, honey, and fresh bread. The aroma of the meal mingled with the lingering warmth of the fire, creating a comforting atmosphere. As he worked, he thought about the events of the past day. The children had eaten well, played with the animals, and for the first time in many weeks they had smiled freely. Mrs. Lynn had rested well, her exhaustion from the long journey slowly lifting. Soon, the children appeared at the bottom of the stairs, their faces bright with curiosity. "Good morning," Lee said, his voice still soft but filled with excitement. "What are we going to do today?" After breakfast, they dressed warmly and stepped outside. The cold air nipped at their noses and cheeks, but the children barely noticed. The snow crunched under their boots as they followed Mr. Thompson across the fields. The ranch was peaceful, the only sounds being the distant calls of birds and the soft whistling of the wind through the trees. The first stop was the chicken coop. Mr. Thompson handed each child a small scoop of feed. "Go ahead," he said. "The chickens are hungry this morning." May crouched down to watch the chickens up close, her eyes wide with fascination. Lee took a careful approach, observing the chickens before throwing the feed gently onto the ground. "Good job," Mr. Thompson said with a nod. "You're learning fast." The children beamed with pride, feeling useful and confident for the first time in weeks. Next, they moved to the horse barn. The horses whinnied softly as the children approached, their large eyes filled with gentle curiosity. Mr. Thompson showed them how to brush the horses, explaining that caring for the animals was more than just feeding them. It was about understanding them and being patient. May hesitated at first, unsure of the large, strong animal, but as Mr. Thompson guided her hand, brushing the horse's soft mane, she began to relax. Daniel followed suit, giggling when the horse nuzzled his shoulder. Lee stood back for a moment, watching carefully, then stepped forward, gaining confidence as he brushed the horse's side. After the morning chores, Mr. Thompson led the group to the small vegetable garden behind the house. Though covered in snow, he explained how it would be tended in the spring and how it provided food for the family during the warmer months. The children listened intently, asking questions about planting seeds, watering plants, and growing food. "Everything we do here helps us survive and be happy," Mr. Thompson explained. "Even the smallest tasks have value." The children nodded, beginning to understand the importance of responsibility and care. By midday, they returned inside for lunch. The meal was simple: soup, bread, and a small portion of roasted vegetables from the last harvest. As they ate, the children's chatter grew more lively. They asked questions about the stars, the animals, and even Mr. Thompson's life on the ranch. "Do you always live alone?" May asked, her eyes wide. Mr. Thompson shook his head slowly. "I used to live with my wife," he said quietly. "She passed away many years ago. Since then it's been just me and the animals, but seeing you here, it feels like there is life again in this house." She understood the feeling of loss and how loneliness could settle deep into a person's bones. She reached out and touched the children's hands gently, feeling grateful that they had found kindness and safety in such a cold, uncertain world. After lunch, Mr. Thompson suggested a walk to the nearby woods. The children eagerly followed, their energy renewed by the warmth and nourishment of the day. As they walked, he showed them the small creek that ran through the woods, partially frozen over with ice. "Be careful," he warned, keeping a watchful eye. "The ice may not be strong enough to hold you." They picked up small sticks and tossed them gently onto the surface, watching them crack slightly and slide into the water. The simple joy of nature brought laughter and wonder to their hearts, something they had missed during their long, difficult journey. Mr. Thompson then led them to a small clearing where the sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a magical glow. "This is a special place," he said. "I like to come here when I need to think, or when I want to remember that the world is full of beauty, even in winter." For a time there was only peace. No hunger, no fear, no worries, just the quiet presence of nature and the comfort of a safe companion. On their way back, Mr. Thompson stopped at the edge of a small hill overlooking the ranch. The view was breathtaking, fields of snow stretching into the distance, the farmhouse glowing with the soft light of the afternoon sun, and the distant mountains rising majestically on the horizon. "Look at that," he said. "Even when things seem cold and harsh, there is always something beautiful to see. Remember that no matter what happens." The words resonated in their hearts, giving them a quiet sense of hope and reassurance. As evening approached, they returned to the farmhouse, tired but happy. Mr. Thompson prepared a warm meal, and the children set the table with Mrs. Lynn's help. The simple act of preparing food together felt like a small celebration, a sign of a family beginning to form in unexpected circumstances. Over dinner, they shared stories and laughter. Daniel described a game he used to play with his father, May recounted a favorite memory of her mother, and Lee spoke of his dreams for the future. Mr. Thompson listened attentively, offering encouragement and gentle advice. Mrs. Lynn smiled, feeling her children come alive again after so many difficult months. After the meal, Mr. Thompson suggested they gather by the fire for a quiet activity. He pulled out a small, worn notebook and a set of colored pencils he had kept for himself. "Why don't we draw what we love most?" he suggested. "It can be anything: animals, nature, family, or even dreams." Daniel drew a picture of a horse he had fed earlier, May sketched the tall trees in the forest clearing, and Lee carefully illustrated the ranch with the farmhouse at the center. Mrs. Lynn joined them, drawing her children holding hands, smiling and safe. As they worked, Mr. Thompson watched quietly, his heart swelling with warmth. The simple act of creating, of expressing themselves through art, brought joy and healing. The room was filled with laughter, conversation, and the quiet scratch of pencils on paper, a stark contrast to the silence and hardship they had known before. Later, Mr. Thompson brought out the small guitar again. He strummed a gentle tune, and Mrs. Lynn began to hum softly along with it. The children clapped and joined in, creating a small chorus that filled the room with harmony. The music carried warmth, joy, and a sense of belonging, wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. As night fell, the children were guided to their beds once more. This time, however, there was no fear or hesitation. They climbed in happily, pulling the blankets up to their chins and closing their eyes with contented smiles. Mrs. Lynn tucked them in gently, feeling a quiet gratitude for the man who had opened his home and heart to them. Before heading to his own bed, Mr. Thompson sat by the fire for a few moments. He reflected on the day, realizing how much had changed in just 24 hours. The children had begun to heal, their spirits lifted by warmth, safety, and care. Mrs. Lynn had found hope in her children's laughter and in the kindness of a stranger. And he, too, felt a sense of purpose, knowing that his simple acts of compassion had made a profound difference. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the ranch in a soft, white blanket. Inside, the farmhouse glowed with light, warmth, and the quiet joys of shared life. Mr. Thompson looked at the sleeping children and the woman who had found refuge in his home. He smiled, knowing that Christmas was not about gifts or decorations, but about kindness, connection, and the hope that even in the darkest times, hearts could shine brightly. As he finally lay down to rest, he whispered softly to himself, "Tomorrow will be another day, full of work, learning, and joy, and together we will face it." Outside, the wind sang a gentle lullaby, and inside, the farmhouse was alive with peace, laughter, and the beginning of a new, brighter chapter for all of them. The next morning, the ranch was bathed in a soft golden light, the snow sparkling like tiny diamonds under the rising sun. Inside the farmhouse, the air was filled with the comforting smell of breakfast cooking. Mr. Thompson had risen early once again, tending to the fire and preparing a simple meal of porridge, fresh bread, and warm tea. There was a quiet excitement in the house, a sense that today would be different, special, and full of promise. The children awoke quickly, their small feet padding across the wooden floors as they hurried downstairs. Daniel's eyes were bright with curiosity, May's smile was soft but radiant, and Lee's thoughtful gaze followed every movement. Mrs. Lynn moved quietly, preparing herself for another day, though her heart felt lighter than it had in months. "Good morning," Mr. Thompson said, his voice gentle and welcoming. "Breakfast is ready. Eat well and we will have a busy day." Thompson had not heard in his home for a long time. Mrs. Lynn joined them, sipping her tea and listening to the children's animated conversations. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of belonging and peace. After breakfast, Mr. Thompson suggested they go outside to check the fences. The children eagerly followed him, eager to help and explore. The ranch stretched wide, covered in fresh snow, and the morning sunlight reflected off the white ground, making everything seem magical. "This is how we take care of the land and animals," Mr. Thompson explained. "Strong fences keep the animals safe, just like love and care keep families safe." Mr. Thompson guided them gently, offering praise and encouragement with every step. Mrs. Lynn watched, her heart swelling with pride. The children were learning responsibility, patience, and teamwork. More importantly, they were beginning to feel capable, confident, and cared for, things they had missed for far too long. After finishing the fence, Mr. Thompson led them to the barn to feed the animals. The horses whinnied happily, recognizing the children and moving closer for attention. The cows nudged gently, eager for the feed they had come to expect. Daniel laughed as a horse nuzzled his shoulder, May giggled while brushing a cow's side, and Lee carefully poured grain into the trough. The animals seemed to sense the calm and kindness in their new companions, moving peacefully around them. Once the chores were complete, they returned to the farmhouse for a simple lunch. As they ate, Mr. Thompson suggested a quiet activity, storytelling. "Why don't we share stories about the things that make us happy?" he said. Stories can help us remember the good in life, even when things are hard. Lee spoke of the stars, the mountains, and his dreams of one day exploring the world beyond their village. Mrs. Lin added her own story, speaking of her husband's kindness and the simple joys they had shared as a family. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled as she spoke, feeling a mix of sorrow and hope. Mr. Thompson listened quietly, moved by the strength and resilience of this small family. In the afternoon, he suggested they work on a small project together, building a birdhouse for the garden. The children eagerly agreed, gathering wood, nails, and paint. Mr. Thompson guided their hands as they measured, cut, and assembled the pieces. Daniel carefully hammered the nails, May painted the walls with bright colors, and Lee helped align the roof. The project was simple, but the joy it brought was immense. "This birdhouse will give shelter to the birds," Mr. Thompson explained, "and it reminds us that even small acts of care can make a big difference." For a moment, they felt the satisfaction of accomplishment, knowing that something they had made would bring life and comfort to others. As the afternoon faded into evening, Mr. Thompson suggested a quiet walk through the nearby woods. The children, bundled in warm coats, followed eagerly. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and the trees cast long, delicate shadows across the ground. The forest seemed peaceful and magical, as if it had been waiting for them. "This is one of my favorite places," Mr. Thompson said softly. "It reminds me that no matter how hard life can be, there is always beauty around us if we take the time to see it." May admired the way the wind whispered through the trees, and Lee listened to the distant sound of a creek, fascinated by the patterns of water under ice. Mrs. Lin walked alongside them, smiling quietly. She felt a deep sense of gratitude toward Mr. Thompson, whose kindness had given her children a chance to experience joy, safety, and wonder again. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel hope and happiness without guilt or worry. When they returned to the farmhouse, Mr. Thompson prepared a simple dinner. The children set the table, helping Mrs. Lin with plates, glasses, and utensils. The meal was warm, nourishing, and filled with love. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, questions, and stories from the day. After dinner, Mr. Thompson brought out the small guitar once again. He strummed a gentle tune, and Mrs. Lin joined in with a soft hum. The children clapped, sang along, and even created their own little rhythms with spoons and plates. The music filled the room, bringing warmth, joy, and a sense of togetherness. For the first time in a long while, the house felt alive, not just with the sounds of living, but with the sounds of family. As the evening wore on, Mr. Thompson suggested they sit by the fire and talk about the future. "I want you to know," he said gently, "that you are welcome here, and I will do everything I can to help you. We will find food, clothing, and support. You are not alone anymore. You have saved us in ways I cannot put into words." Thompson, feeling a sense of security and love that had been missing for so long. The fire crackled, the wind whispered outside, and the snow continued to fall softly, covering the world in a peaceful blanket of white. Later, Mr. Thompson helped the children to bed, tucking them in with care. They were sleepy but content, their small faces relaxed and peaceful. Mrs. Lin kissed their foreheads and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For the first time since their journey began, she felt that her children could sleep without fear or worry. Before heading to his own room, Mr. Thompson stood by the fire and looked around the house. The warm glow illuminated the children's drawings, the birdhouse by the garden, and the small signs of life that had returned to the ranch. He smiled quietly, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. He had opened his home and heart, and in doing so had created a place of hope, joy, and love. That night, as the house settled into silence, Mr. Thompson reflected on the true meaning of Christmas. It was not about presents, decorations, or even food. It was about kindness, compassion, and the courage to open one's heart to those in need. He realized that the greatest gift he had received was the chance to make a difference in the lives of a mother and her children. Outside, The snow glistened under the moonlight, the ranch wrapped in a quiet, magical stillness. Inside, the warmth of the fire, the sound of gentle breathing, and the sense of safety filled every corner of the farmhouse. It was a Christmas of miracles, not the kind found in stories, but the kind that happens when people show care, empathy, and love to one another. The next morning, Mr. Thompson woke to the sound of birds singing outside the window. The children were awake, excitedly preparing for the day, and Mrs. Lynn was already tending to small chores with a renewed sense of purpose. The bond between them had grown stronger overnight, rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet joy of knowing that they were no longer alone. Together they faced the coming days with hope, determination, and the knowledge that they could rely on each other. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with laughter, love, and the simple beauty of human connection. And as they worked, played, and lived together, they understood that family could be found not just in blood, but in kindness, trust, and the willingness to share life's burdens and joys. For Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Lynn, and the children, that Christmas was a beginning, a new chapter filled with warmth, hope, and endless possibilities. And in the quiet moments, when the snow fell gently and the fire crackled softly, they knew that even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, the smallest acts of love could create miracles that lasted a lifetime.